My friends, today we'll take a look at the madness going on in Hollywood.
I don't care what they tell you in school, but Hannibal was black.
I mean, this is what Hollywood actively wants you to believe about one of history's greatest military commanders. His tactics are still studied today. Check out this article from IGN. Denzel Washington to play Hannibal in Netflix new historical epic.
You serious?
To be honest, I thought Netflix was done with historical epics after the Bridgerton. I mean, Denzel Washington to play Hannibal and historical epic are two different statements. And why did Denzel Washington even agree to portray Hannibal? Bro, you're 68! Hannibal Barca was 29 when he crossed the Alps to bring the battle to Rome. Sadly, Hannibal is just the latest historical figure that has been blacked.
You're a lucky man.
Although Hannibal was born in North Africa, he was not black. They would just ignore the history and the very diverse genetic makeup of this gigantic continent. Many YouTubers already went through this mayhem with Netflix's Queen Cleopatra, and now Netflix is back at it again. As a reminder, although Queen Cleopatra was from Egypt, we know for a fact that she was of Greek heritage. But according to Netflix, anyone born in Africa is by default black, as in African American. That's why they're also working on a documentary about a well-known African genius, Elon Musk. It's a shame such a big platform like Netflix openly promotes this rewriting of history, and the public is unanimous. That Cleopatra documentary got an average rating of 1.1 on 10 out of 82,000 reviews. So after stealing Egyptian culture, Afrocentrists are now aiming to steal Tunisian culture. At this rate, they'll soon claim that the Berbers that conquered Spain were also black.
Yo!
At this point, you might be wondering, who's Hannibal? Hannibal Barca was born in 247 BC in Carthage, a coastal city located right next to Tunisia's current capital, Tunis. He was a military commander that Rome despised because of his tactical genius, like at the Battle of the Trebia, Lake Trasimene, and Cannae. He inflicted massive losses on the Romans and brought Rome to its knees. But jealousy and internal feuds between Carthaginian elites allowed the Romans to rebuild their forces, bring the fight directly to the enemy capital, and eventually destroy it. So the movie director for this Netflix historical epic will be Antoine Fuqua, who was involved in many action movies that you've probably seen. But it seems he wants to shift to more historical stories. So for his upcoming Hannibal movie, Fuqua probably got inspired by the History Channel, where they picked Nicholas Andre Pinnock to portray this Carthaginian general. Let's be honest, at this point, the History Channel has gone rogue. It should be called the Alien Truckers and Mystery Channel. Anyway, this documentary is just illogical. No other Carthaginian is depicted as black. Just Hannibal. Do you realize how ridiculous this is? Hannibal and his Roman nemesis Scipio are said to have met twice in person. Once before the Battle of Zama, a bit like in the movie Kingdom of Heaven.
I pray you pull back your cavalry.
And once many years after the Punic Wars. At the same time, the Romans called people from sub-Saharan Africa Ethiops, an archaic term for burnt face. Yet, no Roman source ever used that term to describe Hannibal. As a matter of fact, they never even bothered to describe his physical appearance. Probably because he looked just like every other Carthaginian. So what did Hannibal look like?
Describe what Marcellus Wallace looks like. He's black. Go on.
Regarding his ancestry, officially Hannibal and his family were members of the aristocracy of Carthage. Hannibal's ancestors are said to have descended from the Phoenician settlers who colonized the region in the first millennium BC. We can trace this by taking a look at the name of Hannibal's father, Hamilcar, as stated on Wikipedia. is the Latinization of Hamilcas from the Hellenized form of the common Semitic Phoenician Carthaginian masculine given name, meaning Melkarth's brother. Melkarth being the patron god of the Phoenician city of Tyre. Once again, a clear connection to the Levant. Even during Hannibal's exile after the Second Punic War, his first stop was in Tyre, the mother city of Carthage, where we can suppose he had family or friendly connections. Many years ago I went to Byblos in Lebanon, in ancient Phoenician lands, and people there are definitely not black. According to his genealogy, we know Hannibal was Phoenician, at least culturally, but that doesn't solve the question. In the US, African Americans have first and last names that can be traced back directly to Western Europe, yet they don't necessarily look Western European. In regards to our Carthaginian general, Hannibal Barca, a lot of the rumors from Afrocentrists stem from this coin, which they claim depicts Hannibal. What? It doesn't even make sense! First of all, it's not even a Carthaginian coin, but an Etruscan one from modern day Italy. There are no inscriptions or clues on the coin to identify the man. Even the elephant depicted is Asian, whereas Carthaginian coins all show African elephants. But now let's take a closer look at these coins. This one represents the god Melkarth. Here's Hannibal as Hercules. So these two are most likely idealized, but we can still see some very Mediterranean traits. But the third coin is said to be a direct depiction of either Hannibal or his father Hamilcar. To me, it's very Eastern Mediterranean facial features. Very Semitic, could even pass for Greek. And here's a depiction of a female according to a Carthaginian coin. Once again, very Mediterranean looking. You see, the Phoenicians were extraordinary seafaring people. They revolutionized naval capabilities to the extent that in the 5th century BC, Hanno the Navigator is even believed to have sailed all the way to Mount Cameroon. They expanded all throughout the Mediterranean and established numerous colonies, including Carthage, which was strategically positioned at the midpoint between the Levant and the mines in the Iberian Peninsula. Eventually, the small trading post used for resupply became the capital of a new growing empire, which would eventually clash with Greek ambitions in the Mediterranean. Both from a geographic and cultural perspective, Carthaginians were turned outwards towards the sea in order to trade with all the neighboring lands. For example, when the Carthaginians established their colonies in the Iberian Peninsula, they called it Hispania, which means the land of rabbits in Phoenician. Now, realistically, only a few thousand Phoenicians could have settled in Carthage.
We are finding that less than 20% of the genetic lineages that we find there could have come out of the Middle East. Most of them look like aboriginal North African markers, for lack of a better term. They look like they've been there for much longer.
This 10 to 20% Phoenician stock would have been the basis for the Carthaginian aristocracy, but that leaves out a gene pool of 80%. According to mitochondrial, Y chromosome, and autosomal DNA studies on burial sites, Carthaginians are indeed the result of the mixture of Eastern Mediterranean settlers and ancient North African populations. According to this study, the Carthaginian gene pool was very diverse, as it extended from modern-day Berbers all the way to modern-day Sicilians, although with a significant cluster between modern-day Sardinians and Sicilians, which makes a lot of sense when we look at it from a geographical perspective. The easiest explanation is that Carthage grew to become this massive trading center that attracted thousands of merchants and workers from the North African heartland. Follow-up studies analyzed the impact of this Carthaginian gene pool in their colonies. Our data, while limited, suggests that the Eastern or North African influence in the Punic population of Ibiza was primarily male-dominated. And also don't forget that Carthage had tens of thousands of slaves, but mostly from Europe, because European tribes kept fighting each other and sold their captives to the rich merchants of the Mediterranean. But if we want to know more about Hannibal, we have to focus on the ruling class of Carthage. Although the basis of this aristocracy was of Phoenician origin, there were too few to really control the land, and quickly had to forge strong and durable alliances with the people of North Africa. For example, one of Hannibal's sisters was married off to a Numidian king, a Berber from modern-day Algeria. So everything points towards Hannibal having part Phoenician and part Berber North African genetics. So we spoke about the history of the Barca name, but truthfully this is all we know about the Barca family tree. Here's Hannibal, his brothers, and his father Hamilcar, who also proved to be an extremely talented military commander. He fought in the First Punic Wars, the mercenary uprising of Carthage, and conquered half of the Iberian Peninsula, but I digress. Apart from that, we don't know anything about the Barca family. In this book about Hannibal by Tony Bath, he claims the Barca family, which originally came from Cyrene, was a powerful one, but not at the time among the first families of Carthage. Everything points towards the Barca family not being part of this Phoenician stock. Tony Bath doesn't show his sources, so we have to take what he says with a pinch of salt. But still, let's take a look at it. Cyrene, that's deep inside the eastern side of modern-day Libya. As a matter of fact, I found that 100 kilometers west of it, there was an ancient Greek colony called Barca. Greek historian and geographer Herodotus places the foundation of the city around 560 BC. As a matter of fact, Cyrene welcomed multiple waves of Greek settlers. The region was also known for raising horses and had close commercial ties with Carthage. From the little clues we have, it's possible that the Barcas were Greek settlers in Libya when eventually they moved towards Carthage. Most likely the Carthaginian colonies in western Libya, where they probably mixed with local Berbers. And before the Afrocentrists come back, here's an Egyptian depiction of their neighbors from right to left: Egyptian, Assyrian, Nubian, and the last four are Libyans, with shining pale skin, with light brown curly hair, looking very different from the Nubians. So the hypothesis is that Hannibal's family was not part of the original founders of Carthage, and they only appear in documents during the turmoil of the First Punic War against Rome. Perhaps Hamilcar was a small noble, perhaps a commander of a Libyan contingent, which rose to prominence during these chaotic times. The vicious way the Carthaginian elite looked down upon Hannibal and his father could demonstrate that they were indeed seen as outsiders and competitors. Perhaps the Barcas rose to prominence through a marriage with a member of the Carthaginian aristocracy, and this could have angered many people. On a side note, we know that Hannibal married an Iberian princess, probably to consolidate his holdings in Hispania. Hannibal's Iberian mercenaries were considered to be his most loyal and experienced warriors. But saying Iberian is a simplification. The main contingents of his Iberian infantry and cavalry were from Celtiberian and Lusitanian tribes. We can guess this because during Hannibal's speech across the Alps, he addressed his Iberian troops and said, "Long enough in pursuing cattle among the desert mountains of Lusitania and Celtiberia." Although these lands were not officially conquered by the Carthaginians, these were probably vassal states who sent soldiers as tribute to Carthage, and probably Hannibal's wife was part of either the Celtiberians or the Lusitanians. We only know that the Phoenicians called her Emilke. Apparently she was from the capital of the Oretani tribe named Castulo, near modern-day Linares. The Oretanis were Celtiberians that at first were at war with Carthage, but that eventually had been defeated in battle. So this marriage could have been the root of their subsequent alliance with Carthage. On a side note, number 2, I highly suggest you to study Hannibal's blitzkrieg campaign against the Vacae tribe in 220 BC. It was like a practice run for everything that would follow. Hannibal took his troops across dangerous mountain passes to surprise the enemy, perhaps at a time of the year that was unexpected, where he had to use force and diplomacy to deal with treacherous mountain tribes, and where he showed excellent tactical skills while repelling an ambush while crossing the Tagus River. And that almost unknown battle is his first official military victory. In the end, Hannibal was not black, although the mainstream media might disagree.
He's black. Go on.
Remember the good old days of the BBC, before this entire woke rewriting of history? In 2006, they created this beautiful docudrama called Hannibal, Rome's Worst Nightmare, with Alexander Siddig as Hannibal. I loved that show, and this depiction of Hannibal actually fits into the story very well with the little information we have available. But the story of blackwashing history doesn't stop here, because eventually the British Broadcasting Corporation took BBC a bit too literally, and are now the main culprits of this cultural colonization. In 2014, they published this cartoon series portraying Roman soldiers as black. Actually, even the Celts are depicted as part of a multi-ethnic society. And then they doubled down as part of Black British history. They released Been There from the start. Press X for doubt. Once again with the black Roman soldier. And the comments are turned off. That's always a very good sign. Actually, in the song, they start by claiming that the first inhabitants of Britain were black. Why are they so obsessed with race? And it still seems to be a trending topic, because as late as the 18th of September 2023, the Telegraph wrote, Stonehenge was built by Black Britons, children's history book claims. And in the book they say, Britain was a black country for more than 7,000 years before white people came. And during that time, the most famous British monument was built, Stonehenge. What is this? This is insane. Mind you, all this is targeted at children. Something has to be done.
Right to jail, right away. No trial, no nothing.
It all started with the discovery of one prehistoric skeleton from 10,000 years ago with partial SNPs. And because of that one sample, experts at the University College of London then used the DNA information to create a facial reconstruction of Cheddar Man, rendering his dark complexion, deep brown hair, and light eyes in lifelike detail. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. Red flag number one is that blue eyes and very dark skin are traits that are extremely rare when combined. Why wouldn't it be the same thing 10,000 years ago? And the most absurd is that all these claims completely ignore that Neanderthals were present in Britain for hundreds of thousands of years before that. They are the first Britons. And we know for a fact how they looked like. They were not necessarily tall, but they were muscular to protect their body from the cold. They had pale skin and developed the genes for red hair and light eyes. Why would the Neanderthals develop pale skin but not the Homo sapiens that came right after? We also know that subsequent migrations of Homo sapiens mixed with Neanderthals, and of course the genes would have been passed down. The real scam is that the artist that created the mannequin for Cheddar Man either poorly understood genetics and the findings of the study, or that they had some sort of political agenda. The study clearly said light eyes. They didn't say blue. We're talking about light brown, maybe green. These people living in Europe were called Western hunter-gatherers. And a lot of research has already been done about them. A more accurate depiction would have been this one, which looks like someone from the Middle East, or something like this as well. You can clearly see the connection with modern-day Europeans. Cheddar Man could have also looked like the Inuits or other indigenous populations with this bronze-like skin color. After all, both lived in a glacial environment and had this similar diet. And you know we have to take these studies very carefully, because even the Neolithic farmers from Anatolia, that are said to have brought in agriculture and pale skin to Europe, were depicted as having brown skin. And now, because of all these historical scams, Sweden's national broadcast SVT decided to go full woke. And we know, never go full woke. Of course, they portrayed the first hunter-gatherers of Sweden with black skin and deep blue eyes. I'm Gustav Vasa now. Oh yeah, talking about scams and Scandinavia. The show Vikings Valhalla decided to portray the historical Jarl Hakon, the de facto ruler of Norway between 975 to 995, and rebranded him as a black female. For modern audiences, ah non, mais c'est catastrophique. I'm not gonna go over the entire song because talking about this literally drains my energy. But right after, they claim Septimius Severus and the Aurelian Moors as black. Same story again. What the Romans called Moors were their subjects from Mauritania and Numidia, or modern day Algeria and Morocco. The same Berbers as during Hannibal's time. But let's squeeze this story just a little bit more. Septimius Severus was Roman emperor from 193 to 211, when he died while campaigning in Britain against the Caledonians. Once again, the claim is that he was black only because he was born in Africa, more precisely in Leptis Magna, a former Carthaginian colony in present-day Al-Homs. It's the same story as for Hannibal. However, this time we actually have one colored portrait of Septimius Severus. We see his Syrian wife Julia, his two sons, and look! He's clearly depicted as having dark skin. Apparently, he also had a heavy Phoenician accent when speaking Latin. No idea how this sounds like, so I wanna know. Yet, the Telegraph wrote, Roman Emperor hailed as Black Britain even though he wasn't black. You know, it's awkward when the Telegraph does the fact-checking. Emperor Septimius Severus, himself a descendant of Carthage, went to honor another famous Carthaginian. When he went to Byzantium, he built a massive marble monument at the location of Hannibal's tomb. Sadly, the monument only made it to the 11th century. As opposed to Hannibal, this time we have a better understanding of the family tree. We know that on his mom's side, Septimius Severus was of Roman descent. Meanwhile, his Carthaginian ancestry comes from his father's side. We already covered deeply what a Carthaginian must have looked like. We also know that after the fall of Carthage, numerous Roman colonists moved to the provinces of Africa, probably forming a significant minority. As a matter of fact, on his dad's side, Emperor Septimius Severus's great-grandfather was one of these Roman colonists. And we even know that he came from the Octavian family. So we have to assume that this branch mixed with the local Berber aristocracy. But what about this portrait? According to experts, the true complexions are probably not accurately represented. For example, if I take a picture of myself at the end of the summer, I'm gonna look much darker than at the end of the winter. On top of that, artistic conventions of the Roman era often depicted women with fairer skin and men with darker skin. It makes sense, men were outside with constant sun exposure and got much darker than the women that mostly stayed indoors. There is even a rumor that when Emperor Septimius Severus was battling the Caledonians north of Hadrian's Wall, an Ethiopian soldier serving in the Roman army presented himself to Septimius Severus. The emperor reacted with fear, because he believed that the man's dark skin was an ill omen. Honestly, I'm not sure how much we can believe this story, but to claim that Emperor Septimius Severus was sub-Saharan African is a big stretch with little historical context. Anyway, I'm pretty proud of myself. In just one video, we've debunked Hannibal, Cheddarman, Jarl Hakon, and Septimius Severus. You might ask yourself why they're doing this. It's very simple. Academics from the College of Worcester openly explained their goal. The results show that blackwashing is a stepping stone to quality black representation in the Hollywood film industry. All this is part of an ideological push, and believe it or not, the problem of this woke rewriting of history was brilliantly summarized by J.R.R. Tolkien. Evil cannot create anything new. They can only corrupt and ruin what good forces have invented or made. Oh, by the way, since Tolkien was born in modern-day South Africa, I can't wait for Netflix's documentary about him. That's all I have for you today. Let me know in the comment section what you thought of my analysis. If you're new to this channel, make sure to like and subscribe. And if you want to support my work, make sure to check out my Patreon or PayPal. The links are in the description below.